you're taking over for a coach that was beloved for a very long time, but then got, the fan base got sick and tired of him not being able to win big games. Matt Campbell does not have a history of winning big games, but, the proof will be in the pudding once he gets his team on the field. I think instead of hype, there's just a lot of organizational structure there, and a lot of we're going to let the results do the speaking for us.
Welcoming to the channel, Rivals National Recruiting Analyst and one of our own, Penn Stater, Adam Gorney, Penn State graduate 2003. I think I just missed you by about a year. But Adam, it's great to have you on the show. You've been with Rivals forever. We've never really overlapped until the merger here, but welcome to the program. Welcome to Blue White Illustrated. You've been a familiar face to a lot of people, and it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, happy to be here and a fan for many years. And I go way back to the Blue White Illustrated days of old. So I'm happy to continue with the tradition here.
It's really interesting how many people you talk to that came through as like a blue white intern or something like that. That's how I got my start. Or we're working, prior to wherever they spread their wings and flew. I did not make it out of Happy Valley. You're quite far out of Happy Valley, but no, it's really interesting because you always run into somebody that you didn't even know worked there. So it's cool to see. But first, we're going to test your Penn State medal. First off, I think Penn State fans always wonder, hey, where'd you live and what was your go-to bar while you were here?
Yeah, so my strategy was a little bit of a nerdy strategy. I stayed in the dorms all 4 years. So my reasoning was because I saw the apartments and the frat houses that I attended every weekend, and I was like, there's no chance I'm living in one of those hellholes with beer cans everywhere. So what I did was I hit the parties, but then I retired to my quiet dorm life where there are some expectations of cleanliness. So that was important. Favorite bars, Cafe 210 West for the Long Island iced tea pitchers. Then the Monkey Boys, I hit up pretty hard. Watermelon was my favorite. Is that bar still there that had the Monkey Boys?
The saloon is unfortunately has passed on. But man, the Monkey Boys was that was a choice we all made, and it was certainly of all the choices we made, it was one of them. So
yeah, and then there was a bar right on the corner where the Starbucks is. That is definitely not a sports bar anymore, but that was my spot. Yeah, Sports Cafe. Yep, that was right down the street from the Collegian. So after the Collegian, I was there, and then one of my friends and I on Sundays would watch the NASCAR races there, and they had the perfect beer drinking glasses there. So those were sort of my three spots. And then obviously I went to the first most Saturday nights for the First Family, which is now gone. I'm really dating myself. A lot of this stuff is passed on and stuff. So I was just back there I was there for graduation in December. And I am shocked at what downtown looks like now. It's like a city. So when I was there were no high rises. And if they were, the state college, city council or whatever it would be would fight them. And now it's like a big city. So it's definitely different. But those were my spots. And then, I would dip in here and there wherever they would have me.
It's always funny to tell people the Arby's that people used to drive their car through is now a high rise. So, and a wonderful sushi place. But anyway, we're going to get back to modern day Penn State stuff. You've been following the Nittany Lions for a long time for personal and professional reasons. What have you picked up from the Matt Campbell staff? I know you've talked to Derek Hoosier for a feature on our site a couple of months ago, the Penn State's new GM. What have you picked up from the Matt Campbell era, and how is this regime settling in?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be all about on the field, but you're taking over for a coach that was beloved for a very long time, but then got the fan base got sick and tired of him not being able to win big games. Matt Campbell does not have a history of winning big games, but the proof will be in the pudding once he gets his team on the field. I think instead of hype, there's just a lot of organizational structure there. And a lot of we're going to let the results do the speaking for us. So, recruits are going to come to campus. I don't know if a lot of kids in the typical Penn State recruiting territory really know Matt Campbell's history. So getting to campus is going to be important. Getting out on the road is going to be important. I think his Ohio roots are going to be very crucial recruiting that state. Obviously, it's going to be very difficult against Ohio State to win a lot there. But you've seen in a lot of his early offers, they kind of went back to the well that they know. I don't think anybody's going to argue with Midwest offensive linemen coming to Penn State. And then you go elsewhere for the skill players. So it seems like there's not a lot of talk, but there's a lot of organization, a lot of structure, a lot of how they're going to do things very professionally. And then once they get on the field, what's great is for Penn State fans, and especially for Campbell, is this schedule this upcoming season is on the easier side, let's say. So I think they're going to start off on the right foot. But obviously, the games that matter, the Ohio State and the Michigan games, and, now Indiana, let's throw them in there, and everything else are the ones that are going to matter most.
How much from a national recruiting perspective has Indiana mucked everything up for everyone in terms of expectations, in terms of what no doubt a phenomenal job in what they've been able to do, but we're kind of sitting here in Happy Valley, and it looks like a bit of a different build. I mean, how much have you seen from a national perspective? How much is that early splash is effective for coaches?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And the way he did it was, he basically took his James Madison team and took it to Indiana with a lot of veteran guys that were hungry, that wanted to prove themselves. And what he did was, a phenomenal coaching job and really smart. And, from a recruiting perspective, there's been significant uptick in players that at least visit Indiana and then they see. But he has to strike a delicate balance. And I've actually written about this, is like, he cannot fall into the stars game and just chase, big names and stars, because that's not how he built his program. And it's certainly not how he kind of operates himself and his program. He thrives on being the underdog, the guy that, didn't get a head coaching chance until later in life. And now I'm going to prove that I'm smarter than everybody, and which he obviously did by winning the national championship at Indiana. And everybody knows this, but Indiana was so bad. They were just hardly a heartbeat program. They were just awful. So that speaks to Cignetti's brilliance and his intelligence, but it also speaks to what can be done if you do the transfer portal the right way.
How do you draw those parallels with what Matt Campbell can do at Penn State? Obviously, the bar has been broken for a lot of new coaches, but how do you think he translates what he did well at Iowa State to a bigger functioning entity at Penn State?
Yeah, and that's going to be the thing. Those are going to be the questions that cannot be answered now. And I'm not going to come here and be like, Matt Campbell's going to be the greatest coach and take Penn State to the national championship, because we just don't know. Because the things that need to be done in today's day and age are the things that Penn State fans have complained about. James Franklin used to complain about, if you're talking about a $25 million budget at the schools that are making the national championship. Now let's take Indiana out. Maybe that's an outlier. Maybe that's a one-year situation. We'll see. We'll see how long Indiana can stay up there. But I think that the important thing are the results on the field and ramping up as much as you can. NIL money. Forget facilities. Forget Beaver. Beaver Stadium is going to look nicer and all those kinds of things. Kids care about it, but not really. What they care about is who's paying me the most, who can get me on the field the earliest, and who can develop me for the NFL. Because as NIL has become much more of a talking point in college football recruiting and in college football, the smart kids, the ones that make the smartest decisions are the kids that collect a little bit of pocket change through NIL, but want to go somewhere where they can be developed for the NFL. So, Matt Campbell, what he did at Iowa State was extraordinary. Now, he never won huge, but just winning big at Iowa State, just consistently being a winner there and then taking that on, there's a little bit of a comparison to Kyle Whittingham at Utah and now at Michigan. Utah is not going to recruit nationally. A lot of kids aren't going to go there for on and off field considerations. But now at Michigan, he won big at Utah. He's going to win. The idea is that he wins even bigger at Michigan. That's sort of the same model. Matt Campbell took a program that was really not much for many, many years and made them a consistent winner. Now with all of the resources Penn State has and a much bigger and broader recruiting base, he could take that profile and win even bigger, which essentially from Pat Kraft on down to the lowest fan who kind of watches them on Saturday, every one of them knows that the struggle at Penn State is not winning, and it's not winning 9 or 10 games every year. It's beating Ohio State, beating Michigan consistently, getting to the college football playoff, and then essentially winning a national championship.
From a recruiting standpoint, how does he make that leap through being the football coach, being the guy who preaches football 24/7? But of course, the outside influences are great. And everyone seems to have more money in the 2027 cycle, or with that's probably unfair. It's more of a 2026 roster and 2027 because it's all the same, coming out of the same bucket eventually. How does he maximize what he has while everyone else seems to have more? And then taking it one step further, you made the Michigan Whittingham comparison. How do programs like that sort of tread water enough to get to official visit season, to get to where they need to start picking up commits? Because Michigan has not gotten a commit since Whittingham was hired either, if I'm correct. So like, how do these programs deal with Notre Dame, who's got respectable relationships, Ohio State? You're trying to compete at the top level. I'm just curious, what's your take on how he gets that done in this time period without football games?
The good news, I think, is that he did so much more with so much less at Iowa State that he comes to Penn State and says, oh my God, I have every single opportunity that I could ever want here. The issue with that way of thinking is that he doesn't know how other programs have it so much better. So if the complaint for years at Penn State was that they don't have enough NIL money, and now he's stepping into a much bigger pool than he had at Iowa State, they still have to raise a lot more money to get into that game. So I think that has been sort of the talk among Penn State people that follow the program, is that does Matt Campbell kind of understand, and obviously a very smart guy and a smart coach, but does he understand taking that step from Iowa State to Penn State, there is still a further step that needs to be had to get to what LSU is doing and what Texas A&M is doing with unlimited oil money. And look at what Texas Tech has done with Cody Campbell out there with literally almost unlimited money to buy players and then to go out and win. And I think that's important. The second step is that I would caution Penn State fans who are concerned about Matt Campbell's recruiting or his recruiting strategy that you must give it time. Like, this is not something where someone's going to come into Penn State, Matt Campbell. James Franklin was probably a far better recruiter than Matt Campbell. I would put Matt Campbell ahead in game situations, which has been really the complaint of the Franklin era since the beginning. That in game he has not been very good, but he had the players to win, and that was the frustration. In recruiting with Matt Campbell, you must give him time, because signing day is not until December. He hasn't coached a game there. A lot of kids in the Mid-Atlantic are in wait and see mode to see how he does there. So give them through junior days, get them through official visits in the summer, sell the vision. And then with a schedule that is much more favorable to the Nittany Lions than a lot of other schedules have been, let him win 10, 11 games, get into that playoff picture. And I think in that fall window, when kids get on campus, there's going to be a lot more interest into what he can do.
Yeah, I think we're going to record that and play that back, because it's been a tough sell to Penn State fans who just, kind of want it now. And we've talked about the new coach bump, and I still think it's out there to be taken. It's just a matter of looking at all these programs that have made college or that have made head coaching changes in the Power Four. Just hasn't happened for anyone, because I think the calendar is so different. You talk about the type of kid that is making those decisions now. And I think that there's a couple different boats here. There's the guys that are right in your backyard that you've known for a long time. And Penn State, frankly, doesn't have that luxury, because they don't have that sort of relationship base in this region. And those are the guys that you lean on for early commits. And then you've got most guys now waiting for late spring, early summer, take those official visits, because that's going to give you peak leverage, I would say, in terms of making these decisions.
Yeah, the calendar is completely different now. And so like for quarterbacks, no, the calendar is pretty much the same. Okay. So they're going to commit early, but we're talking early now, maybe June timetable, because what happens is that these kids want to get through portal season. The high school kids want to get through portal season. So the coaching staff want to get through portal season. So they restock their rosters in the way that they see fit. And if they come in and they take 3 wide receivers out of the portal, and I'm one of Penn State or one of Oregon's top targets at wide receiver, I go, wait a second, they just basically recruited over me through the portal. So I think, timetables are wound back a lot now. And early commitments, and I was just doing this in the West, there were like 15 early commitments in the West, probably 5, 6, 7 of them will go to another school. A lot of those guys now will commit early because every time they visit a school, they get paid to do it. They commit early because a handler or a 7-on-7 coach, when he takes them on another visit, another school will give them money. So there's a lot of financial incentives. Yeah, so the calendar is completely different now, and to preach patience is very difficult, especially for a class with a new coach. But quarterbacks have not changed. They're still going to come off the board first. They want to get off the board first. They want to recruit their class. The coach wants them off the board so they can start recruiting around them and those kinds of things. So I think that's going to be an important. But with a new coaching staff, whether it's at Penn State, whether it's at Auburn, Lane might be a little bit of a different story at LSU because he's a known commodity. You're going to see a little bit of a delay in commitments because they want to see what it looks like on the field in the fall. So even if kids commit early and they get locked in, you could see those kids taking visits elsewhere. I think you're going to see that all over the country, especially with the schools that have new coaching staffs. So as much as Penn State fans have that itch to get commits on the board, I think the summer is going to treat them a lot better than the spring.
Have you heard of Way Fruit Farm? It's this great farm market bakery and cafe. You can shop at them either at their farm in Port Matilda or downtown State College.
No way.
Yes, Way Fruit Farm. They have all sorts of seasonal fruits and veggies.
Way cool.
No, Way Fruit Farm. But anyway, you should visit their bakery and cafe. They serve amazing food all day.
Way
Fruit Farm.
It's fascinating because looking at the rivals team rankings now, you've got one clear outlier in Oklahoma. It's got 19 commits, 1 5-star, 11 4-stars. They just went on a big run, I believe it was last weekend. So it's fascinating once you get past that, though. There's nobody close to them in terms of commitment numbers. Ohio State's got 9, Texas A&M's got 10. You go down through the top 10, Texas Tech's got 6, Georgia's got 6, Notre Dame's got 7, USC's got 5, Miami's got 5, Oregon's got 6, Nebraska's got 6, Texas has 6. That's a big difference. And I think a good sign if you're a Penn State fan, because a lot of this is playing out. There's so much angst, I think, right now to get on the board without noticing that not as many schools are firmly on the board as probably you would think in your head. I'm going to go back next time you're talking and check out how many commits Penn State had at this time last year, because it was a bunch, and it's very, very different to see this cycle make its way back through here. One big change for Penn State. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, Sean, Oklahoma has 19 commits. And so their recruiting class is pretty much done. I mean, maybe some final touches, but now they have to recruit those 19 guys because everybody's going to be coming after them. And we'll see how Venables does next year. And every school has their own internal chemistry about things. They brought in a lot of recruiting staffers. This is Jim Nagy's first full recruiting cycle. Maybe he wants to make a statement. Maybe the philosophy is get as many guys is committed as early as humanly possible, and then hang on through the season. Every school has their own approach. Now, I totally understand. When you go to the team rankings and you see Ohio State at number 2 with 9, and they already have 2 5-stars, and USC has a 5-star, and Oregon's recruiting well. And I think everyone still has PTSD about the Oregon game at Penn State last year. So you're, the new hated team in the Big Ten because of what happened and all of those kinds of things. I see it as you go down the list, 17 of 18 or whatever have at least a commit, and then Penn State's sitting there. It is difficult. It's hard to swallow and to get excited about it, is very difficult. But every school has their own approach to this. Every school has their own internal politics about why things are working the way they are. I would just give until July 4th. If there are no commits by July 4th, then maybe start worrying a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. 10 commits at this time last year for Penn State, so they would have been right in the mix here. We've seen a lot of times under Franklin, really, when they would jump out to having the number one class in the country in May or whatever it might be. Yep. Didn't end that way. So I think it's just an interesting approach with the calendar changing, and just being out there. You're always like 2 years behind in adjusting to the time changes. And this is kind of, I think, what we're seeing is that calendar moving on. So also changing for Penn State is the geographical look at prospects. As we talked about before, not a ton of natural connections in this general area, but they're moving out your way too. They're moving out west. There's some new connections there. They're also in the Midwest as they've been. How do you think things have changed for Penn State from that aspect? And we talked to Alan True last week about leaning into the Midwest, but what about out west? How's that what do you think the returns on that can be for Penn State?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think they're going to pick and choose. I think Franklin kind of cast a wide net and had a little bit more of a recruiting cachet out here, and getting, a Troy Hune or something like that to commit early and all of those kinds of things. I think they're going to be a little bit more choosy because, quite honestly, Iowa State had no recruiting footprint in the West and California. They did a little bit into Arizona. So we'll see if they kind of tap into those things. But again, I think Matt Campbell and his staff are smart enough to know that they're going to have to win, within the cliched, 300, 400 miles, whatever circle they draw around the campus, then pick and choose elsewhere, whether that's going into the Southeast, whether that's, Penn State in prior years went into Alabama and had some success there. And then they're going to go into the Midwest to get guys. But there are definitely, for quarterbacks, there are definitely places where they're looking, whether it's New England, which is kind of becoming a little bit more of a hot spot, a Peter Bourque type that is going to be recruited very hard, or if they come out to California or Georgia, that's pretty much, or Texas, that's where you go for quarterbacks. So it will be interesting to see how much they lean on guys. What I do like about this staff is that they haven't freaked out and just taken commits for commit's sake. Like, that is an important thing that they can't do, just to kind of lean on those Iowa State connections in Minnesota or Wisconsin or Iowa and just say, hey, let's get some commits, let's get going, and then we'll figure it out from there. They have targets, they have a board, they know what they're doing, and I think that's going to be important. But in terms of like Penn State recruiting California very, very hard, I think picking and choosing guys that have connections to the area, guys' families who lived in certain areas. There's a lot of guys, Brady Edmonds is committed to Ohio State. His whole family is from Ohio. They grew up Ohio State fans in Huntington Beach, California. So I think those kinds of connections, and I think we'll talk about Lucas Rohe here a little bit, I think is the way that they're going to handle the West. But they can be a little bit, picky and choosy because they've come out here and had some success. So I think they can continue to do that.
Yeah, I think quarterback is interesting. Arizona is kind of just an outlier right now because Penn State's been active there. Taylor Mauser from Arizona, Penn State's offensive coordinator, of course, Will Mansell out there, the quarterback. So I think it's just going to be fascinating to see, number one, how many of these turn into actual visits, and Will's supposed to come visit in early April, I believe it is, and how that distance, inaccessibility, how that can all help or hurt with the West Coast guys. Of course, they're looking for defensive tackles out west. They've dipped into the Polynesian market, which is not something that Penn State's really done much. So it's leaning on those connections and just kind of making it work. Another connection you mentioned a second ago, we try to work in as much Altoona as we can for the Corey James of the world here. But Lucas Rohe has those connections to the east. He's a guard from California. He's also been to campus a lot at Penn State. I don't have his profile open, his rival's profile open in front of me, but he's camped at Penn State multiple times. He visited the new staff at Penn State, which is notable because he only had a couple of weeks to do so. But what do you think Penn State's chances are here with Lucas Rohe?
Yeah, I think they have some work to do, but they're still just so strong. I mean, others are definitely involved. He visited USC and Oregon last week, and USC told him he could play any of the 5 positions across the offensive line, which is very interesting. And I don't know if that will turn out to be true, but it's certainly a recruiting pitch that intrigued him. He loved that Oregon had basically 4 people working as offensive line coaches at one time. Now, he's never said that he's wanted to stay in the West or, had to stay there, and Penn State was just pulling him away. I think Texas is emerging for him a little bit. He's going to visit Georgia and Auburn. Those, I think, would probably be stretches. And then, he's expected to get out to Penn State again. He didn't tell me it was on his visit schedule, but I would be shocked if he didn't. He's just so familiar with the place. He had been out there before. He was close with Phil Trautwein, and that's why Florida is sort of back in the picture with him. But I think he just wants to get out there again. He's had great conversations with Penn State's new staff. And then there's just the family, factor there. It's not just like his uncle lives down the road and runs a bed and breakfast, which he does. But like his entire dad's side of the family, I believe, is from Altoona. They're still there. That's where they stay when they go up to games. He knows the area. They've been there multiple times. I think he's gone fishing in the State College area. So this isn't just sort of we had some family in Pennsylvania once, and maybe I want to take a look. He still has a lot of family there. And if he were to make a move so far away from home, there'd be a very, very high comfort level if he went to Penn State.
Yeah, I think for some out of the region, you always have to lean on that. I mean, Penn State got Darius Dixon, and I think he's going to be a really good player for them. Yeah. And there weren't too many natural connections here, but usually when Penn State goes that far, there's going to have to be some sort of built-in connection that they can work on. And of course, that works for Lucas Rohe. What do you think of Lucas Rohe? I think fans are going to look at this, say, okay, 3-star prospect, guard, whatever. But that list you just read off is pretty impressive for schools that actually want to take him.
Yeah, and I understand it. And when I post Lucas Rohe stuff on the board, I get a lot of West Coast softy stuff and all that. And I totally get it. California is not where you go for offensive linemen. But he's a little bit of a different kind of character, sort of an ass kicker, likes to be physical, likes to mix it up, has great size, a frame that you could really work with. He went up against Marcus Fakatow every day in practice at Orange Lutheran when they were both there. Fakatow has now transferred out. But I just like his makeup, his character. He's much more, and if this makes sense to people, he's much more of an Altoona-minded kid than an Orange County kid. So I think that is definitely a big factor on why he wants to play at Penn State or why he wants to play at Oregon, where they have these massive Polynesian dudes just moving people than a lot of the schools. Or Texas, which has, which Sark's idea of an offensive line is get them as big as humanly possible, and we'll mold them into what we need them to be. So I think that's why he's looking at schools with a lot of great offensive line development. And I think why he was so interested in Penn State to begin with, and then, has circled back after getting to know this staff a little bit. But other schools have definitely gotten way more involved here. They kind of see a little bit of a fresh opening. So Penn State staff will have to continue to work to get him and use and kind of lean on those connections that he has to get him on campus again.
Yeah, we've seen some of those openings over the last couple of months. Just an interesting side plot, this class of 2027, because you had really good relationships. One thing that the previous staff did really well from top to bottom, from James Franklin to the recruiting coordinators, was building those relationships to make some changes sort of moot. If you change a position coach, something like that, you still could fall back to, Kenny Sanders, Alan Zamaitis, and then some other guys in that building. And now it's kind of all out the window. And I think that you're seeing kind of some of the results play out because of that. You mentioned Marcus I knew I would go on that one, but Marcus Fakatow, and I probably just said it wrong again. But Penn State has dipped into the West for defensive line connections there. Akaka Malloy has been a guy who has leaned back on the guys he was recruiting at UCLA, guys whose brothers he coached at UCLA, Utah, just not typical Penn State areas. Do you think that can be fruitful for them? I'm not sure how long he'll be here, but do you think that can be fruitful for Penn State, at least in the time being, to make that work in the 2027 class?
Yeah, I think it could be fruitful in the sense that they're going to get guys on campus because of it, and then we'll see if they can close on those guys. It's going to be interesting to see just how much success they have. Fakatow is definitely a guy who's looking at Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State right now. He's going to visit Penn State. Now, I don't think it's just a courtesy visit. I think he's actually legitimately interested in saying it. I think it's super important that, a Polynesian coach is on staff. Not only is he a very talented coach with a lot of connections, but inside that community, it is very important to have people that you're comfortable with and familiar with, especially if you're going to go to a place from Southern California to State College where it's not really a massive Polynesian culture there. You're not hitting up luau's every other day. So I think that is important. But they've gone after a lot of guys from the region. Johnny Ioane, Tavita Nonu. Those are not guys that typically Penn State is recruiting, even though Vega has become like a first round pick. And in high school, he had a lot of development to do. So I think that is going to be important to get them there. And then you're going to have to close on them. So still a long way to go. We'll see kind of how much success they could have with it. But there is definitely growing interest because you have a Polynesian coach on staff, and all of the history and tradition and all of the success, especially along the defensive line, to get guys there.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see the portal class that they brought in featured a few of those guys, and if these guys waited out and, kind of fall back on them for advice, fall back on them for feedback about Penn State. I think it's going to be fascinating to see if that's maybe a November or December type thing rather than a summer official visit or whenever. Yeah, Penn State fans would like that to get done.
And I think that's the most important thing, and something that might be overlooked in recruiting is like in many ways, the head coach is the least important factor in a lot of these kids' decisions. The most important factor is when they're hanging out in an apartment on Saturday night and they're getting like the real idea of what goes on around there and what coaches are likable, which coaches aren't. Like, does he fit in with the guys that are there? If Marcus Fakatow comes there and he gets the sense that, hey, this is a pretty cool place and there are people that are like me here, that is way more important to kids than walking around, a football facility and seeing the renovations at Beaver Stadium. While important, that connection, and especially in today's day and age of recruiting where kids are looking for like connection and people that understand me as a person and as a football player, I think those are crucial. And that's why getting him on campus will be the first step.
Yeah, and a lot to overcome with no more watermelon monkey boys in State College. So, Adam, before we get you out of here, I think you carry some more of that fandom with you, watching them whenever you can, every Saturday or whatever it is for your watching schedule. What do you think of Penn State in 2026? How hopeful are you for this squad?
I'm actually, very, very optimistic. Are they going to be national championship contenders? Probably not right off the bat. But the schedule shapes up very, very nicely for them to make a run to the playoff. I just pulled it up just to make sure. If Marshall, Temple, Buffalo. Okay. 3-0. Come on. Wisconsin gets a little tricky, but Wisconsin has been so bad recently, and that's a home game. Northwestern, we'll take it. Then things get a little tricky. USC, Michigan, at Washington becomes difficult. But any year that you can skip Ohio State on the roster, do I see 10-2, 9-3 at worst? Where else do you lose? Like Marshall, Temple, Buffalo, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Purdue, Minnesota, Rutgers, Maryland. That's 9. So win another one, 10, you're in the picture. Win 2, go to Washington and maybe beat SC at home. You're 11-1 in that first year. That's pretty good. Now, you're talking to someone who talked to his wife and said, look, we're going to the national championship if Penn State goes last year. And then I'm at my kid's soccer game as they're losing to UCLA, almost having an aneurysm about getting out of there so I can see what was going on. And then the Northwestern thing happens. And then the most crushing blow was Indiana. I had hope, I had dreams, and then they drive down the field like that. And then it looks like he's pushed out of the back of the end zone. He's not. It was not good. It was an ugly season. So I'm tempering all expectations, but if I don't see 10-2, I'm going to be disappointed.
And if you want to vent like Adam just did about Penn State's season last year, next year, you can go to bluewhiteillustrated.com, check it out on the message board. You said, where are they going to find those losses? Well, message boards will have every answer you could possibly want for that because of the year that Penn State fans just went through, but we like to keep it light here. So we appreciate that. Adam, thank you very much for being on hand. I missed the promo, but thank you very much for joining us. This has been an enlightening, wonderful conversation, and we hope to have you on at some point. And, if things go bad, you can guest host for me one of these times. It'd be, a fresh face to talk about, Penn State's issues. Yeah. But no, we appreciate you having you on.
Thanks, guys.